This is the story as told by my dad. My dad was a young teenager at the time and was riding on the bus in Chicago. A man got on and sat in a seat across the aisle from him. He turned toward him and started to strike up a conversation. My dad says that the hairs on the back of his neck raised, and he got a seriously creepy vibe from him. Gacy was all smiles and charm and was asking my dad increasingly personal questions. Luckily, before things got too personal or creepy, my dad's stop came and he enthusiastically noped off the bus and forgot about it. It wasn't until years later, 1978, the year I was born, that he saw on the news that the same creepy guy, affectionately known by children as Pogo the Clown and Patches the Clown, had a thing for teenage boys. Here's another creepy detail. My dad is best friends with a guy who happened to live across the street from Gacy as a child/teenager. He confirms that Gacy was a creepy dude. He also confirmed that his parents observed the police/forensics go to work on Gacy's basement and painstakingly remove 26 teenage boys from the crawl space. When I was 18, I worked at my college's residence building at the front desk, and I think I almost got assaulted. Or murdered. You be the judge. During the summer, the building operated as a hotel, so 2.5 floors were hotel rooms and half of the third floor were student rooms. The whole building operated with a hotel swipe key system that was pretty outdated, and all the doors were powered by 4 AA batteries. If the batteries died, there was a decently lengthy process to replace them and reprogram the door. A dark-haired guy came to the front desk from inside the building while I was working an overnight shift at around 1 or 2 a.m. and said he left his key card in his room. I made him a new one and made my first error of the night. Hotel guests could have as many room keys remade as they wanted, hypothetically. Students, however, were supposed to be given a temporary key card and charged $2 to be returned when theirs is located. I gave him a new key for his room and asked if he was a student or a hotel guest, and he replied student. At this point, I should have checked our system to charge his account, but I was caught up doing administrative duties and forgot. I used to trust people way too easily at this job, but quickly learned not. Later on in the night, maybe around 3 or 4 a.m., he came to the desk again and said he couldn't get into his room. I asked if he just forgot his key again, and he said no, the door wasn't working. I asked if the light was coming on when he swiped his card, and he said no, so I figured the batteries were dead. I told him I'd have to change the batteries, and I went up to his room with him. He asked me for my name and I told him. He didn't tell me his. I opened the room door manually with a master key and told him I'd have to prop it open while I worked on the back panel to replace the batteries. He said no, it's okay, I'll close it, and closed and deadbolted the door locked. Really fucking weird, but I tried not to think about it. I had changed the batteries on plenty of other doors by this point, and some students were iffy about having their doors propped open for their room to be on display for anyone walking by. He also had a really thick accent, and I thought he might be an international student since we had a lot of students from other countries where English was not their first language. I gave him the benefit of the doubt and thought maybe it was also just a language barrier issue. At this point, though, I really felt like something was wrong, but I tried to ignore it, so I didn't freak him out. While I was trying to focus on fixing the door as quickly as possible, he kept trying to entice me to go further into the room, saying his bed was broken, and he needed me to take a look at it. There was something underneath it that needed to be fixed, etc. He held out a little gold house key and said, "I have a key, go get it," and threw it under the bed. He said there was a leak under the fridge. He just kept trying to get me down on the ground, throwing random problems at me. Obviously, I told him no, I'd send maintenance up in the morning to take a look at it if anything was broken. I had my back to him, and he asked me if I would take off my glasses. I said, no, I need them to see. His tone of voice changed, and in the most steady, chilling manner, he said, Ella, it's okay, you can take them off, and from behind me, he reached around and tried to take off my glasses. I swatted his hand away and, trying to remain composure, said, no, thanks. I need to keep them on. Even though he was creeping me the fuck out, I didn't want to be rude to him. I didn't want to get in trouble if he complained about me, or risk upsetting him and having him yell at me. I got up to grab something from the door repair kit, and undid the door deadbolt and opened it up in the process. He jumped toward the door to close it again and told me to keep it closed. I told him no, I had to open it to start reprogramming it from the front. While I held the door open with my foot and grabbed something from the door repair kit, he started playing with the little wispy hairs at the top of my forehead and trying to touch my shoulder. I swatted him away again and asked him not to touch me, and focused on getting the fuck out of there. He once again tried getting me to follow him into the bedroom, saying the bed was broken, and I went as far as the door frame to see if I could spot any actual problem with his bed. This is when I realized that he had nothing in his room. No dishes in the kitchen, no shower curtain in the bathroom, no sheets on the bed. Nothing. This wasn't his room. My brain once again went back to the international student theory, thinking he had just arrived today and hadn't gotten a chance to buy anything yet, but in the pit of my stomach, I knew something was wrong. I fiddled around with the door for a few more seconds before announcing that it was fixed, and quickly gathered the door kit and left. Before I had reached the elevator, he came back out without his shoes on to follow me. He tried to get back in to get his shoes and called out, Ella, the door isn't fixed, you need to come back. I went back and opened the door manually, and told him if the door was broken, I'd have to send up maintenance to fix it in the morning. I knew he was going to follow me to the elevator again, so I closed the door behind me once he went inside and ran down the stairwell as fast as I could. When I got to the front desk, I checked the computer and saw that the room he was in was supposed to be empty. It wasn't a student room or a hotel room. I locked myself in our back office and called campus security. He came down a few minutes later and went behind the desk. I yelled at him to get on the other side and wait, now that I knew he wasn't a resident. He tore the corner off a slip of paper I had sitting on the desk and drew a flower on it, then put it back on top of my papers. When security arrived, he ran back up to the empty room and tried convincing them he lived there, so he wouldn't have to leave. He kept showing them his key, which had decided to work on the door again somehow. They escorted him back downstairs and came to ask me if he really did live there. Obviously he fucking didn't, that's why I called you guys crying and terrified. He kept interjecting to argue that he did live there, but couldn't even recall his room number when asked. Security asked him for his student card, and he couldn't produce it, so they told him he would have to leave if he couldn't prove he lived there. While they were grabbing his information, I listened from the office and could immediately tell he was lying. The phone number he gave was just a bunch of random numbers. The name he gave was prefixed by him, as if he was trying to think of a name. When they asked him for his address, he just said across the street. One security guard asked if he lived in the apartments across the street, and he said yes, but couldn't tell them what the building number was. He said his apartment number was 1200, but I moved into that building a few months later and apartment 1200 doesn't exist. When security asked what his purpose was to be sneaking into a room, he just kept up the ums and us and saying he didn't know. They'd ask, were you trying to see a friend? Do you know anybody who lives here? Were you here to hurt somebody? And he kept fidgeting and saying, I don't know. No reason. I was just here. At one point, he tried to tell them he was my friend, at which point I poked my head out of the office to say that I literally had never seen him before that night. He left. We didn't call the police because he didn't actually do anything, but it was still fucking unsettling. Later on, it dawned on me how he figured out that room was vacant. One of the housekeepers had been using it as her personal break room. A few days later, a housekeeper came to the desk and told me they found the door dead bolted open, the TV on, and a housekeeper inside watching TV. She must have forgotten to close the door when she left for the night, and when the creep let himself into the building, he found it. I never saw him again, and to this day I have no clue what he was doing there. I haven't worked there since last winter, and overnight shifts still have me the heebie-jeebies. My family and I had a caravan in a holiday park in NSW. We would go there every school holidays, and there were many kids I used to run around and play with. I have fond memories of this place, where I learned to ride a bike and had my first kiss, but other memories are not as good, and now leave me with that egg flip feeling in my stomach. The people that owned the caravan park had a son. He was roughly 25 years old, and I would have been around 5 out of 6. He would drive around the park and collect everyone's rubbish on a tractor, and do other odd jobs like this to help out his parents. Every once in a while he would pull up when I was playing out the front and ask if I wanted a ride on the tractor. I, being young and naive, of course accepted and jumped on, because what child doesn't want to ride on a tractor? This was back in the days when parents would let their children play in the streets without much supervision, and you just came back home when the street lights came on. One day when he dropped me back to our van, my dad came storming out, grabbed me by the arm and yanked me off the tractor. Without saying a word to the man, he took me inside and told me to never ever hang out with him again. I don't want you hanging around with that man again, he said without saying why. But he's nice. He gives me lollies, I say. Just don't. I'm telling you. Don't talk to him, he replied. I couldn't understand why my dad didn't want me talking to the nice man who only gave me tractor rides, gave me lollies and hugs, and sometimes the occasional sandwich. I remember telling the man one day, my dad said I'm not allowed to talk to you anymore, to which he smirked and replied, oh yeah, why is that? Fast forward nearly 13/14 years later, my family and I are watching the news when a man's face flashes across the screen, attached to a story where he had killed 2 people and is now serving time in prison. My dad said, look at this. Look at this. I knew he was bad news. There was always just something about him. Do you remember when he used to take you around on the tractor? My blood ran cold and my stomach dropped. The most disturbing part? He killed people with pills he would call his lollies. Please always listen to your parents. My God, I would be dead by now if it wasn't for them.